Okay guys, welcome to our first geography lesson for this year. I'm just going to do an introduction today to the concept of physical geography. As I go through the PowerPoint here, there's going to be questions that are in green. You do not need to answer those questions anywhere. They're just things to kind of make us think about what we're talking about and make sure that some of you have a little bit of background from junior high, but it's not for a grade for this PowerPoint lecture. So let's go ahead and get started for Unit 1 with physical geography. So what is physical geography? And normally if we'd be in the classroom, I'd say write 2 sentences about what you think it is, but we're not in the classroom right now. So geography is the study of the physical and human landscapes of Earth and how they interact between the two. So when we talk about physical geography, we're talking about the study of Earth's physical features. Mountains, oceans, landforms, all those things are Earth's physical features. And then when we talk about human cultural geography, it's the study of how human activities and their relationships to our culture and our physical environment. So we're going to kind of look at this year how the interaction between humans and the earth takes place. We're going to study lots of countries and how that interaction between the people and the place they live takes place there. So we look at 4 physical features that occur naturally. Water occurs naturally, natural vegetation or plants, landforms and rocks, and weather and climate. And we'll get to each of those as we go through our units. So if you look at some of the places, this is the Rio Grande, which is a very big river that's down in Texas and Mexico border. You have the Rocky Mountains, Elephant Butte, the White Sands, the Carlsbad Caverns, the red sands. So all these places are physical features here on the earth that are not man-made. So the world is usually described in terms of spatial terms. So when we talk about spatial relationships, we're referring to the links, first the links that places and people have to one another because of their location. So sometimes we talk about an absolute location, sometimes we talk about a relative location. Absolute locations are the exact spot at which the place is found on the globe. And to determine an absolute location, geographers use imaginary lines around the earth. I'm guessing some of you know what those lines are. So we look at the equator, which divides the Earth into the northern and southern hemispheres, the prime meridian, which divides the Earth into eastern and western hemispheres, latitude, which are the degrees north or south of the equator, and longitude, which are the degrees east and west of the prime meridian. So these are terms you've probably heard before, and when we use these, we find an absolute location, where it actually is on our planet. So you have to kind of figure out how you're going to be able to tell north, south, east, west. And the best way I can do that, having grown up in this area too, is whatever direction Michigan is, that's north. Whatever direction that Elkhart is, that's east. Whatever direction Chicago is, that's west. Indianapolis, that's south. So it kind of gives you an idea of like whenever you're anywhere in the city, if you can figure out where one of those is, you can figure out kind of where the rest of them are. So when you look at the equator and the prime meridian, you can see that we're divided into the northern hemisphere and the southern, western hemisphere and the eastern. So we as Americans live in the northwestern hemisphere. Okay, so we're above the equator and we're to the left of the prime meridian. So when we look at a grid system, that's the lines that are measured with degrees. So that's where we kind of take into consideration longitude and latitude. So you've got the Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn that divided into kind of 2 area land masses. And we can actually find your house with longitude and latitude, our school, exact locations where things are at, where you could find it on a map. So Google Maps and those apps on your phones that give you directions somewhere are using a grid system to get you there. Now, relative location is really how I function, how you guys as teenagers function, especially when you're first getting your license. Because relative location is when you tell somebody the location of a place in relation to another place. So usually this is how most of us determine location. If I wanted to explain to you guys where Memorial Hospital is, I could say, well, you know where the roundabout is downtown by McDonald's, and that's kind of where the hospital is. So kind of think to yourself, what are some different places that you describe in your neighborhood? So if someone was trying to find your school, your church, your house, what places are nearby that you would give them as kind of landmarks so they could find you? Places are a particular space with physical and human meaning. Each place has its own unique characteristic determined by the surrounding environment and the people who live there. So I always tend to think, and I ask my students, what's the most important place to you in the world, and why is that place so important to you? A lot of people will say their homes. A lot of people will say churches or a place they went on vacation they have a really good memory of. A region, however, is a group of places. So if we take several places and unite them because they have a similar characteristic. So it may be a physical characteristic like the vegetation or the climate. So we live in the Midwest because of our climate, right? We don't have the same weather as they have in northern United States or southern, east, or west. We're right there in the middle, so we get a little bit of everything. So that's our region. So if I said East Coast, it might give you an idea of their region is different based on a whole lot of things, not just physical features like our climate in the East, but also human factors. So if you've ever asked somebody from the East or the South or the West for a Coke, you might hear them say things like soda or pop because they call it something different. So that distinguishes their regions. So you can kind of think of all the different regions that we have here in the United States. So there's three types of regions. There's the formal or the uniform. It's defined by common characteristics. So we talked about that. Something is a product produced, just like the Midwest has a lot of like corn and soybeans and things like that. The Corn Belt is Iowa to Illinois. Or they can have something more in characteristics, something like religion. So the Islamic world, the Middle East, has Islam as its religion and predominantly in that area. So that's a common characteristic. Functional regions is a central place and the surrounding area linked to it. So it's a group of places that help each other function. So the area around LA or the area around Tokyo, the area around Chicago helps it function. Chicago wouldn't be a big booming city if all those suburbs around it didn't come into Chicago to do business, to shop, for tourism, things like that. And the last one is called perceptual region. So this is defined by popular feelings and images rather than by actual data. So when we think of like Hollywood, what do you guys think of when you think of Hollywood? We think it's warm and it's sunny and everybody is glitzy and glamorous in Hollywood. I wonder what they say in California about what they think about the Midwest. I think they assume that we all know how to milk cows and that we all know how to like rope horses there because that's the popular feeling about the Midwest, even though it's really not true. So if I were to ask you guys in class, like what's one characteristic about the west side of South Bend, south side, north side, east side, we get a lot of different answers, not just from the people who lived in that area, like the west side kids would tell me specific things, but the kids on the east side or the north side might have perceptions about what they think goes on the west side. The next thing is the physical systems, the physical processes that shape the pattern on Earth's surfaces. So volcano is a physical system. Flooding is a physical system. Hurricanes are a physical system, and they shape the patterns of our Earth's actual surface. So they change the actual surface of our planet. And then, of course, we all live in ecosystems, which is a community of plants and animals that depend on one another and their surroundings for survival. So when we look at how those physical features interact with our ecosystems, they can have a lot of big changes to those ecosystems. So when you guys were in grade school, middle school, you learned about the rainforest, you might have learned about the desert, all these different types of ecosystems. We'll take a look at how they affect people around the world. Geographers do study how people shape the Earth. How they move throughout the earth, how movement affects the world around us. We're not going to focus on that as much, but it is part of our human systems. What we're going to look at a lot is how the relationship between people and their physical environment. So when we look at the physical environment, mountains, deserts, they often are used as barriers to human movement, and they were even used as protection in the earliest times, as you guys will learn in world history next year. But we can also change our environment, like building a dam. And how does that affect the environment around us when we do build a dam? So we'll look at how do people use the environment, how and why they've changed it, and do we have consequences with global warming as a result of those changes. It is important that we apply all the concepts that we've kind of talked about today throughout the year as we go. It's going to get a lot less boring than today's lesson. We'll get more exciting as we get into specific areas, but we have to kind of get all this introduction stuff out of the way. When we look at a geographer's kind of tool bag as to what they do to help them, they look at population pyramids, they look at GPS systems, we look at cartography, which is how to draw a map, which we're going to be doing this week. They look at just direct observation of people and interview them and get statistics, and now we can use technology to really help us understand the world around us. So you're going to go back to the picture of my classroom on the Google slide, and you're going to fill out a survey about yourself. Make sure you save it to your drive because we're going to use that information for a project tomorrow. You do need to submit it as today's assignment, though, in Google Classroom so that I see that it got done today. And then tomorrow we'll be up for another video lesson, and actually tomorrow's lesson is only going to be the directions to the assignment and then a really fun assignment. So hopefully you're looking forward to that. I will see you guys in the video tomorrow.